Good morning. This is the Friday Fireside, and I'm here with Marcella Sciorra. I didn't get it right. What should it?
Almost perfect, Rick. Marcella Sciorra.
Okay,
A
and
mouthful.
very musical name that is. I met you when you were at Deep Intent, and now you've left Deep Intent and you're off on your own. But please tell us, because I think it's a fabulous story, what you did at Deep Intent. I think it's fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you. No, Deep Intent is actually an incredible platform. I was brought in to Deep Intent when they were going from a unknown startup about 3 years ago at the top of COVID to go into a fast growth mode. So I was brought in to build their marketing operations and build the brand to take them from a relatively unknown startup to what they are now, the number one advertising platform for healthcare marketers. And we have successfully accepted an offer to be acquired by IQVIA, which is currently under FTC review. So that's what I did. So, like after that is completed, now I am on to new opportunities in my career.
Okay, now the rest of the advertising world deals with privacy, but that ain't nothing like what you had to deal with. You had medical data on consumers that you were finding a way to let advertisers target people like me wearing eyeglasses. I'm kidding, but I'm not really kidding. I mean, you were doing that, weren't you?
Yes, we were, and in a total privacy forward way, right? So that is the beauty of having a platform, and what really differentiated Deep Intent from a lot of other demand side platforms out there. They were really built from the ground up by healthcare experts for healthcare marketers. So everything was privacy first and was built in a completely anonymized way where we could precisely target patient audiences while protecting their identity,
Cool.
Which is very advanced, very exciting stuff.
All right, and what I suspect most people don't know is you're a cable gal, sort of.
I am.
You
I was
8 years total at Time Warner Cable, and then over at Spectrum Reach. And at Spectrum Reach, you worked for my friend from the Showtime days, David Klein.
Yes.
And so you're speaking the same language as all of us. But now let's talk about that language, because you wanted to talk about performance marketing.
Yes.
And in the world of television where I grew up, we called performance marketing per inquiry, where at 1 a.m, all the broadcast stations turned over to advertising. And if I remember that model, the advertiser didn't pay for the time, he paid for
Paper
the
lead.
inquiry, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah. So that is
toll-free number phone calls, but
correct.
All right.
So that is a facet, right, of performance marketing. Performance marketing has evolved tremendously over, 20 years since, the cable and broadcast industry were doing the direct to consumer with all of the remnant inventory overnights and on Saturdays and Sundays on CNBC, for example, right? So that is part of what performance marketing is. But performance marketing nowadays is much more sophisticated, right? It really is a data-driven approach that really can help advertisers fine-tune their strategies and allocate resources across, not only television, but also across the entire digital ecosystem, really finding that perfect balance.
Okay, now in the PI world, the media outlets got paid when there was a phone call. Do you have roughly that same model in performance marketing, or do the deals, are they all over the map?
So the deals are all over the map because the industry is still all over the map as far as capabilities, right?
Or are we ever? Yes.
Some platforms are more sophisticated, like the one that I used to work for with Deep Intent. Others, I still trying to retrofit so if you take cable, for example, right? Even with audience-based selling in cable, they are retrofitting the delivery of those audiences on a spot basis. So that is a lot the waste and the calculations in the back end. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one payment, but it runs the gamut depending on the capabilities of your partner and your agency as well, and how they are comfortable dealing. But yes, you can definitely, in the categories where you can measure the impact of the campaign. So for example, with pharmaceuticals, you can measure script lift, right? And you can do that in almost real time, so that you can really be able to not only plan, but optimize and then deliver a campaign based on that specific performance for your client. Same thing for automotive, right? You have a lot of different measures within automotive, cars moved from the lot, or visits to the website. So depending on what is the category that you're looking for, you can transact into that specific KPI that you are looking at.
All right. You use the word retrofitting, and I think that's fascinating because, in point of fact, we're kind of an old business.
Yeah.
And there are folks who are old companies with new delivery mechanisms. Think of a Viacom, CBS, Paramount, and then over to Paramount Plus, right?
Yeah.
They may be grappling with how to take a client from CBS broadcast with what they could do there over to Paramount Plus. How does that work from the marketer's perspective? I mean, if I just want to sell a car, what do I do?
So that are actually, it is quite fascinating, right? Because there's a lot of data, like, and a lot of also, not only there is a lot of data, but there is a lot of partnerships in the industry that are happening right now. Take like iSpot, Purchasing 605, that are really going to be making that easier to have that clear defragmentation, if you will, between linear and streaming, right? So if you take, for example, ACR data, which is, like every single thing that goes into a smart TV is measured regardless if it is coming from broadcast, from a streaming platform, or from your cable box.
Right.
So you can use that data, and you can overlap that data with some anonymized identifiers for your audience. So it can be a healthcare audience, it can be a financial audience, it can be an automotive audience, and you can do a blinded match, is everything's completely de-identified. And you can clearly understand what is the overlap between your linear audience and how you can extend your reach leveraging your digital properties across not only CTV, but also OTT across all the different devices, right? So there are a lot of tools at the hands of the networks and the planning companies and advanced platforms that can help marketers be able to bridge and seamlessly follow the audience, right? And I think that the only thing that is really standing on the way, not the only thing, but a big thing that is standing on the way of that capability that, like Charter used to have when I was already there, the audience-based selling. Ampersand is doing an incredible job with their audience base, like for both linear and advanced TV, NBCU, all of them, they are doing great things. The problem is that the agency model doesn't necessarily match the capabilities of what the industry can do, right? So even though we in the media ecosystem can very easily follow the eyeballs between linear to OTT to your mobile device, our agency partners are not built in a way that they can easily adopt that model.
And to a certain extent, that's because of the way that business matured and they sort of became siloed. Yeah. Frankly, very much like the television business became siloed, that the broadcast guys and the cable guys and the linear guys and all those weird digital guys over there in the other room, and now they're the ones with all the money.
Yeah, and I think that's going to change, right? I think that as brands become savvier and start to demand, like there are a lot of tools now for measurement, right? That they can really be able to measure the efficacy of a campaign on a performance, right? So I think the moment that brands start to demand that the agencies adapt their partnership models to be less a retainer based on like how many hours do I get to work on my account, and the profit centers are like, okay, this is how much money the broadcast must bring, the digital team, the programmatic team, right? Because right now they all are centers of excellency and they have, like a bottom line that they need to bring to the agency. I think
they don't like to share, by the way.
No, they don't. I think that is one of the biggest, obstacles.
There's no such thing as I'll take one if you take one. No, that doesn't.
No, there really isn't, which makes it very hard to do a holistic plan for your brand, right? So at the end of the day, is really the brand getting the best plan that they can get from an agency if the agency has obligations and those walls internally. Like I know from my Charter days and Time Warner Cable, as well as Dipping Tent, that our sales teams, they had tremendous hard time being able to sell holistic video plans, because the people that they were talking for the TV, for the linear, was not the same folks for the CTV.
No, that's
and
right.
At Charter, the people that we were talking for cable was not even the same people that were buying national or broadcast. So it was very, very chopped.
The interesting, you mentioned ACR, and I will confess that I happen to be a big fan of the glass. I mean,
yeah.
At the end of the day, the glass is the last thing any of the content touches before it hits my eyes.
Yeah.
Now, the glass isn't smart enough to know a whole lot about me, but your capabilities and your targeting and everything can help that work. But in terms of what show I am watching right now at this moment on what channel and who got that delivered, the glass does that for me. And that marries nicely into one of my comments that, at the end of the day, for the consumers, it's all just television. The consumer, I mean, we've sort of made it really hard for them to find anything, but when they finally found it, it really doesn't matter to them. When we're recording this, CBS broadcast just premiered a 5-year-old program, which was the premiere of Yellowstone, which had premiered on Paramount Network 5 years ago. And it was blockbuster numbers, at least in terms of broadcast. Now, to the consumer, did the consumer really care whether it was on CBS broadcast or got it through cable or satellite? Or no, they wanted to watch Kevin Costner. They wanted Yellowstone, and they got that. Okay, so when we get down to an advertiser trying to find me or my profile and all the rest of it, do you see anybody having the ability to say, you want Rick, here's how you get Rick. If you're going on broadcast, do it this way. If you're going on streaming, you do it that way. If you're doing on CTV, you do it that way. All those different ways, you still get me.
Right. I wouldn't get Rick. I would get people like Rick.
Okay. People like Rick. I understand that.
Right. There's a big difference.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, like I'll speak to my former employers at Dipping Tent, because we were doing that, right? Like in a very anonymized, privacy forward way. We were able to identify groups of, let's talk about patients, right? Like people like Rick, like people who are over 50 years old, who wear glasses, who are in a specific geographic location, like farm animals, whatever, right? Like you live in a farm. So we were able to build a persona, an audience that encapsulated all of those specific characteristics. And then we were able to plan against that audience, right? So we were able to, before our advertiser spent $1, we were able to tell them where to find that audience between the digital channels that we supported and linear TV, because we had ACR data from LG ads integrated into our platform. So we were able to tell, this is the best way to reach and find people like Rick across all of these different channels. And then once the planner said like, yep, that looks good, they could activate that audience. We could also ship out that audience to the TV partners so that they could do a smart, like schedule for the linear, and then automatically optimize the campaign. So within, like the people like Rick, we would be able to say like, okay, so this media specifically is not working. Let's add more of that. So that's all happening automatically. And then measure and report in near real time how many people like Rick are scheduling an appointment with a doctor, seeing a doctor,
Yep.
like getting prescribed, they staying on prescription. So all of that is happening already. And, like that's just healthcare, but there is a lot of other categories that have very similar real-time data, like automotive, financials, that can provide similar reporting and planning capabilities.
Okay, so one of my biggest bugaboos is I feel partially responsible. We used to have a real easy TV business, and folks like me got involved and completely screwed it up. You actually, if you were looking at performance marketing, and if you were, we'll go back to the Yellowstone model, the next season on Paramount Plus, okay? If Paramount wanted to get me to watch Yellowstone, they actually have access not only to the ways to reach me, but because I'm watching it on the glass that can measure exactly what I'm watching, they have the ability to measure if I completed my task, right?
Yeah, so that is like the classic tune-in model, right?
It really is, yeah.
So, like we've been, like when I was a charter, we were already working with, like Turner was one of the early adopters for audience-based tune-in buys, for example. So instead of just focusing on the top 10 networks, if you will, we were able to pull viewership data of people who watch. So let's say if it was a specific show in a rerun that they wanted to do it, so we could pull people who watch the show, have also watched all of these other shows, and then create a schedule that was targeting that specific show and demographics, right? So let's say if they don't have a benchmark, we could say, so what is the comparable, what is the competition? What are other shows that the same audience is targeting? We could find that audience and create a lookalike schedule for them, targeting like the competition. So that is, that is for a tune-in, but that also works for any category, right?
Sure.
So if you want to say, for example, you're a brand, you don't have money to be on TV, right?
Okay.
But you have money to be on. You can work using the ACR data to understand who watched your competitor on TV, and then you can create a conquest schedule targeting that same TV audience on digital properties.
Okay, so it's interesting. Your background at Time Warner / became Charter. I tend to believe that with this mess that we've created with television, the folks that actually have the answer are the cable guys, because aggregation and tune in, and to a lesser extent, maybe customer service, is sort of in their DNA. They know how to get me from this thing to that thing because they control all those channels. Here's
yes and no, because Charter, Comcast, they only have the data that they see on their own viewership.
Yes.
I would say the people that are really positioned for solving for fragmentation and the best data are the OEMs. So the LG,
well, I'm a big fan of, and have a lot of friends at Vizio and LG and Samsung. And again, like I said, I'm a fan of the glass.
Yeah.
But they don't have the aggregation capability to say, okay, everything's coming through our glass. Now we're going to go talk to Paramount and get somebody to go from Paramount over to Peacock because there's a star in that same movie, because they don't have the deals.
They don't have the deals, but they have the data, and they can work with those
folks the
capability. To build. They have the capabilities of doing it. And I think that now with the platforms, and also, yes, the OEM is very fragmented, just like the cable is, right? But with tools like Clean Room,
Yep.
where you can share the data without moving a data and without infringing any of the regulatory handicaps that cable and other folks have.
Yep.
I think that is, we can, like, if everybody's measuring with the same methodology and sharing the data with the same methodology, and then brands can go into a safe, clean room, if you will, plan with that aggregated data, overlap their own data, and then deploy across not only linear but digital. That is already here. That can happen now. It is just people are not still very willing to play in the sandbox, and it's still
No,
very
they're not.
unknown.
They're not. And
you know.
I subscribe to basically every streaming service, and the stuff that I get promotional messages and everything to watch, 99% of it are things that I have no interest in, that don't bear any relationship to anything I watched.
Yeah.
They just completely ignore any behavioral information that they clearly have about me.
Yeah, it's
They
getting
just can't
better, right? Like, I think
organize
that,
it, make it work.
yeah, it's definitely getting better. It needs to get better faster.
Yeah,
I
it needs to
think-
get better faster.
Yeah, yeah,
It
but
is.
it's definitely, I think that the kernels are there. I think that the investment from the industry is here. Some of the partnerships that are happening, you know, like the VAB with the measurement standards that VAB and NBC were spearheading. I think that all of it is moving in the right direction. I think that needs a stronger partnership between media, agency, and brands, right? Because it's going to be, unless everybody's willing to play and learn together and fail together, we're still going to be in the same model, right? So there needs to be a little bit more appetite for risk in order to make it work.
I get that. Well, guess what? On that note, we're out of time, kid.
Damn, it's fun.
So Marcella, Sciorra. Close enough.
Close enough.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
And I will say to all my friends, I do when we sign off, just be nice to each other.